Jeff Dorman, CIO of Arca, back again for another edition of That's Our Two Satoshis Live, where we talk about everything happening in the digital asset markets. For those who are new, we also write a blog. You can find it on our website, ar.ca/blog, where we talk about everything happening week over week, month over month, everything happening overall in the digital asset market. We've been doing this now for 6 years by blog, and I think over a year now by video. And it's really been a helpful tool, not just for those watching, I hope, but for ourselves to really recap what's happening and get a pulse on what's happening in the markets week over week. So as we start here, Tuesday, October 1st, a lot of people calling it Uptober due to seasonality, talking about how, for the most part, markets do really well into October and into the fourth quarter. Not a great start so far. Most markets down, most assets in the market down 5 to 10%. But this seasonality, not just unique to crypto, typically really strong for equities as well. 80% of Octobers have been green in the equity market. 100% of election years had a green October for, actually 100% of election years for Bitcoin have had a green October, November, and December. Not that I really believe in seasonality, especially given that September is supposed to be a horrible month, and yet September was actually pretty good for both crypto and the equity markets. But certainly always a little bit of wonky times around elections. If you go back 4 years ago and 8 years ago, typically a little choppy trading up to the election, and then ultimately once we get past the election, pretty smooth sailing. Given that markets, as much as crypto markets especially, are favoring Republicans right now, the reality is markets just hate uncertainty. And as soon as you get past that uncertainty, whether it's good or bad, usually pretty good for markets in general. And we'll see, with the backdrop now of Chinese stimulus, coupled with the ECB cutting rates and the Fed cutting rates, and Japan backing off of their rate hiking regime. From a macro standpoint, all coast is clear, and now we need some real crypto specific catalysts to drive the market higher. And I think that's where it was interesting. For those who have been watching me, probably not every week, but most weeks, 4 to 6 weeks ago, I was incredibly bullish on the market, saying, this really didn't make any sense that crypto was lagging the broader markets by so much. You had gold at all-time highs, you had treasuries starting to really rally, you had equities at all-time highs. Obviously, you had that fake out in the beginning of August in Japan and in the VIX, and all that came back to all-time highs. So it was really odd to me that the crypto markets were lagging by so much. But now that they've caught up quite a bit, I'm sort of going the other way, which is, well, why did we go up? In the sense that there really isn't that much happening. And I think what I wrote about this last week was really more specific to some of the conferences that we just had in the last week and a half, the Token 2049 in Singapore, as well as Solana Breakpoint. Typically, these conferences are launch pads for announcements, or launch pads for new technologies, new sectors, new something, right? Not necessarily to pump the token prices, but just to kind of talk about something that's really happening. And I think what was surprising to me when not only hearing my own internal recap from our own Katie Talati, our director of research, who was there, boots on the ground, but also reading other recaps from others, it was really lacking any sort of substance. For example, I just picked two out of them that I thought were interesting. One from StoneX and one from Messari, recapping the themes that happened. StoneX said 3 dominant themes emerged. You had decentralized physical infrastructure networks, which is DePIN, memes, and the growing role of AI in the crypto space. And then Messari saying the rising momentum of both DePIN and crypto and AI over the last year and a half continued in Singapore. This is true. Obviously, we know DePIN is an emerging sector. We know AI is certainly strong, especially with the intersection with crypto. But all of this could have been said a year ago. That's what's sort of strange, is that what we've really seen in the cycles of crypto is that new sectors, new themes, new products kind of pop up seemingly out of nowhere at times. I mean, obviously they've been worked on for years, but when they become successful and sort of a hot topic, it comes out of nowhere. And we really haven't seen that for most of this year. You go back to 2021, you had the rise of stablecoins, the rise of DeFi, the rise of NFTs, a little bit of the rise of gaming with Axie Infinity, although that has sort of slowed down a little bit. And then you had that sort of dearth of activity in 22 and early 23, and then we sort of bounced back here a little bit with DePIN and AI and memes, but really haven't had sort of what is that next hot topic? I mean, we've had a little bit with poly market and prediction markets, although I'm certainly on the fence there. I think most of that activity will go away post the election. Prediction markets really aren't new, and certainly aren't new because of crypto. They've been around for decades, and they all look great ahead of a presidential election and then sort of cool off. But even when I went to like Coinbase's recap on announcements, I mean, here are some of the announcements they said. Sui has a partnership with MoviePass. Telegram unveiled a ride-hailing application called Tata in Southeast Asia. Solana introduced a new, the second generation smartphone. Um, they're just we're lacking, right? We're lacking something to get the market super excited. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that it takes time. It takes time to build these apps. It takes time to certainly get adoption. You wouldn't expect every month to be something hot and new, but I think it is more indicative of why some of these rallies, get long in the tooth pretty quickly, and are not sustainable because it really is 100% just based on macro right now. It's based on the ETF flows. It's based on global liquidity. It's not based on the crypto specific factors that we used to fall in love with, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, with that said, I think what is interesting is that um, all of these catalysts can be on the horizon, right? Especially if you do get a Republican in office, and certainly Republicans across Congress. There are a lot of companies and a lot of projects who have great ideas, who want to build and are physically unable to right now because of the lack of clarity on crypto, certainly here in the United States. So that could be the biggest catalyst. Is just maybe there is a backlog of products and ideas that we're going to see launched in really fast time once you get a little bit of regulatory clarity. Or maybe it's just, you need more one-off projects to really hit it big. I mentioned Polymarket, for example, certainly doing incredibly well right now. I think last we saw just on the outcome of the presidential election alone, um, uh, there was, I believe, $1 billion wagered on that. So certainly not small. Um, but there's others as well. One I want to point out that I actually wrote about this week was Hivemapper. And for those who aren't familiar with Hivemapper, this is one of the coolest DePIN projects that we've seen in a while. All of us at ARCA, either individually or as part of our own research, we try to actually get hands-on to as many crypto projects as possible, whether that's working in the ins and outs of DeFi, or in NFT markets, or working on AI projects. Like we try to really use some of this stuff. And with DePIN, it's been interesting, right? We've tried things like Helium and Render. And even though they sort of make sense, a lot of them are just not intuitive, especially when we explain it to others. But I thought Hivemapper is one of the more interesting ones because this is probably the easiest DePIN project I've ever set up, personally, as well as the easiest to explain. And again, I wrote about it in the blog, and I'd encourage people to go check it out if you want more detail. But we bought a Hivemapper device. It's literally just like a tiny windshield stick-on, so it's just a little camera that you attach to your windshield. It took me 90 seconds to set this up. I mean, literally took it out of the box, plugged it into my car, put it on the windshield, downloaded the app on my phone to make sure that it was set up correctly. And all this is doing is it's basically recreating Google Maps. So if you think about the ethos of crypto and why crypto is so exciting, and why I love it so much, the idea is that tokens are the greatest capital formation and customer bootstrapping mechanism ever created. It turns all customers and users into quasi equity holders, and it's just a better way to build networks and reward those that are responsible for the success of these companies and networks. Um, you know, I think about all the successful companies in the world. Like if you drove for Uber, you didn't get any equity. If you delivered food for DoorDash, you didn't get any equity. If you were an early Amazon Prime member, you didn't get any equity. If you have millions of Delta Sky miles, you don't get any equity. But in this case, with Hivemapper, they're basically trying to recreate Google Maps, but instead of Google spending all the money themselves on mapping the world, ultimately Hivemapper is outsourcing to people who drive cars and saying, if you go and buy one of these devices and you install it in your car, the more you drive, the more you map for us, and the more you map, you get rewarded in these honey tokens, HONEY. And basically, if more people drive and more people map it, then Hivemapper will make more money being able to sell the data to trucking companies and logistic companies and things like that, ultimately making the value of honey much higher. So essentially, what you're doing in layman's terms is, if you drive, you can become a quasi equity holder of Hivemapper and receive honey tokens simply by installing the device and driving. And I think that's really cool. So again, not only was this super easy to explain to people, hey, Hivemapper is recreating Google Maps. and trying to map the world in a better way and sell the data because their mapping is better. But they're also allowing regular users to do the mapping for them and basically paying them through these tokens for doing so. So again, it took 90 seconds. You plug in the device, you install it on your windshield, you download the app, then you download a Phantom wallet or link an existing Phantom wallet because Hivemapper is built on Solana. And right away you start driving, and immediately, within a week, you're getting Honey tokens into your wallet. So, I'm going to start writing and talking about some of these projects more often because I think it is really important at this stage that, while we're waiting for regulatory clarity, while we're waiting for existing, Fortune 500 companies to start using crypto in a meaningful way, there are a couple of projects here and there that really should be used by everyone and make a ton of intuitive sense. So, again, I encourage you to check out our blog and read more about this. I'd encourage you to go on the Hivemapper website and buy your own device and start mapping it yourself. I mean, my 11-year-old plays travel baseball here in California. We put 100 to 150 miles on our car every weekend driving to tournaments. That's just easy. It's just an easy way to help Hivemapper map the system and receive Honey tokens. So, maybe in 5 or 10 years, this is, a real thriving enterprise. And the people like myself who are just driving anyway become quasi equity holders of this network. So pretty encouraged by that. Hope there's more of those to come. And even though October is off to a rough start, especially since you had some Iran missiles earlier today that drove some of that, probably a buying opportunity, probably a good seasonal time to be buying digital assets, especially those projects that really are doing real world use cases and starting to drive more than just speculative excitement. So we'll be back again next week. I have a special guest next week going over other things in the digital asset market, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.